So, welcome, Colin, to the Bird Island Wellness Podcast today. And we're going to have a discussion today about Colin's journey with PTSD and how he discovered meditation as a tool for healing. So, welcome, Colin. Brief introduction today.
Okay. My name's Collin. I am 31. I am an Army vet. I was airborne infantry for just about 5 years, went to Afghanistan. And yeah, currently I'm a student with Chung Tai, and they're a Chan or Zen Buddhist organization out of Taiwan. I've been going there since January, but I have been meditating for over 5 years, just kind of enough to dip my toes in and see what it's all about, really, because it's quite a trip. But yeah, other than that, I like volunteering. I'm a student. I'm getting certified to do automotive stuff right now. I got a lot of other interests, but I would say that right now, meditation and mindfulness is probably the big one as far as that goes, and just the benefit that it has that I have personally experienced. And I think it'd be great if more people knew about it, frankly.
Okay. So, your personal journey, why did you start meditating? Give us a little bit of background as to why you started.
Yeah, I started meditating actually as a way to quit drinking. I was drinking pretty heavy whenever I got back home, and it was kind of starting to turn into an issue with my responsibilities and my relationships, and all kinds of stuff like that. And it wasn't helping, and in a lot of ways it was making everything worse, just kind of self-medicating like that. And I kind of got to a point with it where I was like, I'm going to lose everything important to me if I keep doing this. And so I decided that I needed a change, but I didn't really know what to do. I had a friend in high school who was a Buddhist, and they went to ceremonies and stuff like that. And so I was like, you know what? Meditation sounds kind of cool. So I'll give that a shot. And I did it consistently, and it actually turned out to be pretty good. And so I just kept doing it, and I tried to get affiliated with different people, but COVID kind of put a damper on that.
Mm.
But the good thing about COVID is there was lots of time to meditate. So yeah, I started doing mindfulness based meditation and those kinds of practices as a way to sober up a little bit. And yeah, it was kind of on the heels, I would say, of coming home from a deployment. And you kind of do what you do, and see some things, you have some experiences and stuff like that. And so yeah, just the way that I was going with it was, like I said earlier, just making everything in my life a lot worse. So I was like, let's try to do something healthy.
Mhm. Yep. Yep. So you tell us about your symptoms of PTSD. Like, what were your symptoms and how did that help you mentally and physically? Like, what was going on?
Well, the biggest thing is I would kind of, now looking back, because in the moment at that time, it's just kind of like being along for the ride. But looking back, my mood was pretty unstable, uh, you know, and I was having a hard time sleeping. I was having a lot of nightmares, and I was having some physical symptoms as well, like, chronic pain and everything like that, but I was just trying to tough it out. And that just kind of made me more irritable. And it all kind of just culminated into this whole, like, yeah, we're going to try and forget and use the fact that I've had some bad experiences as a justification to kind of just do what it is I want. And I had to just, be honest about myself and what I was feeling. And it was like, yeah, even though you have bad dreams, and even though you're extremely irritable, and you still go to work every day, but you are kind of isolating yourself from the people that you love and that you care about. And yeah, so I those were kind of just some of the symptoms, and just the irritability and the like. I would just change moods, it would seem like, and at the drop of a hat. Like, I would go from everything being fine to everything just being terrible, or just feeling angry all the time and not really knowing why, in the moment. just just stuff like that. And
So
I go ahead.
so just out of curiosity, were you treated as were you on any medications? Were you seen
Mhm.
by, like, medical providers at the time?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, yeah. I was seen by a couple different people while I was still in the army.
Mhm.
And then whenever I moved, I continued treatment. I did psychotherapy and I did psychiatry. I did all of the SSRIs. I did like Wellbutrin, and just kind of just seeing if anything would work. And it didn't. And then I got out and they put me on more medications, on top of the stuff that I was already on. And so it was like I would go to bed at night and I would have like 12 pills that I was taking, to go to sleep, or to manage symptoms. And that was still while trying to maintain a consistent mindfulness practice. But it just didn't really gain a whole lot of traction until I went out and got a teacher, essentially. And I decided, like, okay, so this practice isn't about trying to get something, if that makes any sense.
Mhm.
I mean, yeah, I'm using it to be a better person and to kind of heal from some experiences that I've had in the past. But the spirit of the practice itself is kind of goalless. And whenever you kind of allow yourself to just exist and take inventory of who you are as a person, and that gives you something to work with. As long as you can kind of maintain that awareness of, okay, these are my triggers, these are the things that kind of set me off, or put me in a bad mood, or whatever. So I can try with that practice to sort of deconstruct those symptoms, if that makes any sense.
Mhm. Yep, that makes sense. That makes sense. I personally don't know much about meditation.
Hmm.
I wish I knew more. That's part of doing this whole interview is I like to learn things. I think
Hmm.
it's I think it's important for health and wellness and for
Yeah.
people to get a better understanding of themselves. It sounds super interesting. So, what are your specific meditation techniques or practices that you have found most effective in managing your symptoms? What specific things do you do?
So there are just tons of meditation techniques out there. There are you can do just concentration practice, which is just focusing on an object until, I mean, basically all that I've been able to find in that practice is you do it until, you kind of feel light and your body feels really good. But what I really try to stick to is a mindfulness based meditation practice, because there is a little bit of a difference between meditation and mindfulness. Mindfulness is kind of like doing meditation all the time. It's kind of like you don't necessarily have to be seated, especially like cross legged on the floor or anything like that. It's just about paying bare attention to the present moment. And when you do this practice, and actually, I found a really good definition mindfulness from a book that I'd listened to recently. It's called Wherever You Go, There You Are. And the author says, uh, awareness, mindfulness is awareness that arises through paying attention on purpose to the present moment. And you do that in a way that's not judgmental about what you're experiencing. So, say I am really mad about something that like say I'm in traffic and somebody cuts me off, I usually, typically, I have or what I feel like to be a really good justification for getting angry about that because I'm like, hey, that's, my life and my property that you're putting in danger by not paying attention. But if I come to it from the perspective of mindfulness, the emotions that I'm feeling in that moment, well, I take stock of it and I'm like, okay, so there's a feeling in my belly for sure. And that feeling kind of seems to radiate up through my torso and into my throat. And I am just kind of verbalizing this feeling situationally in some way that seems appropriate to me in this moment. But really, there's just the arising of that emotion. If I really pay attention and if I just take my conceitedness out of the equation, there's a body emotion. And then, there's mental processing about that body emotion. And so, what we kind of get to with this practice is that there is a sort of dichotomy that's established between me and what I feel or what I experience, I should say. So there is me, the experiencer, and then there is the experienced, like feelings or emotions or sensations or, your classical senses like, hear, see, feel. And that just realizing that there is difference between what I consider to be my inherent meanness and actually what is happening as far as the contents of my experience, that is revelatory. That is something that promotes a just kind of like an avalanche of well-being because you're not identified with the contents of your experience. You're identified as that which is experiencing the contents of your experience. And so you see how there's kind of like a little bit of gap there.
Mhm.
And so I get a little bit of breathing room from these difficult situations that I'm having.
That's
And
interesting.
yeah, that's a big
Mhm.
benefit of mindfulness
Mhm.
because sometimes it takes a while. Sometimes you have to
Mhm.
sit there and it's like breaking your own thought loops. If you can have awareness over the fact that I am thinking thoughts about myself, but those thoughts themselves are not myself. They just become other things like, grass or trees or water or whatever you want to say. It's not anything that I can use to describe myself isn't myself. So
Mhm.
why would I choose to allow myself to continue to suffer because of those things?
Yeah, that's if only people just took a breath like that. That's an interesting way, of putting
Well,
it.
it's a lot easier said than done though too, right?
Mhm.
Because even if you know about this stuff, like I've known about this stuff for over half a decade. And
Mhm.
on a good day, I still can't seem to get it right all the
Mhm.
time. But it's those moments where you kind of catch these experiences out in the wild. You kind of catch yourself doing something that you're habituated to. And whenever you catch yourself, whenever that mindfulness kind of spontaneously arises in you, you have a choice. You can either keep doing that to which you're habituated, or you
Mhm.
can choose to be non reactive.
Interesting. Yeah. So, with that, how do you integrate meditation into your daily routine? Like, tell us about what you do every day. Is it just the focus? Do you have like a certain practice every day that you kind of carry out
Oh, yeah.
every day?
I'm glad that you asked that question actually,
Mhm.
because that's kind of where the practice naturally, just kind of spontaneously leads to is in the beginning, I'm somebody who sits down and meditates.
Mhm.
I am somebody who sits down and makes the attempt to be mindful through my own agency. Uh, but after a while, what happens is I just sort of like I kind of alluded to earlier, I sort of spontaneously recognize that I am being mindful right now. And then it becomes on purpose. And then the mindfulness practice that I have in my daily life gains a lot of traction, because whereas I could only be mindful in the beginning whenever I'm sitting on a cushion or
Mhm.
something, now I am taking that out the door with me whenever I leave in the morning. And I am taking that with me with kind of this attitude: I'm going to do this because I know that it makes me better. And not because I think that I want to be better than anybody else, but because I want to be better than myself.
Mhm. Yep.
And
That makes sense.
so and whenever I have any kind of experiences like that, I just go back to that whole, okay, what are you experiencing? And, I've also done a lot of therapy, which I think is just perfectly kind of latticed with this practice, because a lot of the techniques that you learn in therapy are kind of grounding techniques, which are exactly what mindfulness is.
Mhm.
So I went to a therapy session a few years ago, and I was having a really hard time, and my therapist said, okay, well, just take a breath. Can you tell me 5 things that you see? Okay. Can you tell me maybe 3 things that you hear? Can you tell me 2 things that you feel in a sort of tactile way? And what you're doing is you're going back to your senses, and you are becoming embodied right now in your own physical being. And whenever I do that, it kind of brings us back to the point I made earlier: is I'm not the contents of my experience. I am the knower of my experience. But just this simple groundedness, and going back to the way I naturally am before I choose to become identified with other things, is that gives people a lot of peace. Otherwise they wouldn't
Mhm.
use it in therapy, I would imagine. I mean, I'm not a therapist, and I gotta say this right now. I am not an expert meditator. I don't speak for anybody else or anything like that. I'm relaying my own personal experiences and how they kind of relate to the practice, and how the practice has kind of helped me overcome some of the pathologies that I've developed from the negative experiences.
Mhm.
And
Yep.
and so my practice right now is I definitely do sit every day for at least 30 minutes. And I typically don't go longer than 30 minutes because of my back, but when I sit, it's kind of like a reorientation. It's kind of like a refamiliarization with being in a mindful state, so that I can carry that to other parts of my life, like being a student, or, if I have work, I'll take it to work, or, my relationships with other people. It's being aware of what I'm doing. And I'm choosing, okay, am I going to do wholesome or unwholesome things? Am I going to do things that are skillful or unskillful? Because if I am aware of my experience, then that puts me in the driver's seat of whatever is happening. I choose how to react to it, because a lot of the turmoil that we experience in our lives never happened. I mean, I think about stuff all day long, and it's like, well, wouldn't that be bad if that happened? But it doesn't. Or I
Mhm.
get worked up over something that doesn't happen, or I get anxiety over something that I'm expecting to go horribly wrong, and it goes great.
Mhm.
So
Right.
my expectations are not always based in reality. And I worry about different things in my life going good or going bad. But at the end of the day, most of the time it's not up to me. And so also with being mindful is knowing when to let go, like
Mhm.
when to relinquish control over what I'm going to care about, so that I can direct that energy into a more healthy way.
Mhm.
And
Yep.
yeah, so that's kind of the practice right now, and it's just that paying bare attention to what arises. So like whenever I sit down, I'll focus on my breath, and I'll focus on my breath for however long that takes, until I feel somewhat settled and calm. And then you can kind of open up and kind of be aware of what's arising in your field of awareness, like thoughts or body sensations or memories or, a whole list of other things. And typically it's what you need to work on that is kind of surfacing at any given moment.
Mhm.
If I keep going back to the same thought over and over again, okay, well, there's something unresolved there.
Hmm. Interesting. So I'm going to ask you, what have you encountered, like in terms of challenges or obstacles in your
Mm.
meditation practice? Specifically, this relates to, I think, the majority of people out there. Like a lot of people say, I can't meditate, I can't
Mhm.
shut my brain off, where I think that could be, isn't that what it's all about? Is like
Well, it
learning
depends.
how to focus on things. Like, I don't know. I'm just like, I hear a lot of, I can't meditate, I can't
I
focus, you know?
I hear a lot of that too, and I can't convince anyone to try meditating. That's a decision that the individual has to make. The only thing that I can say is that why do you have expectations for a meditation practice before you even try? Because if you go into it with certain expectations and those expectations aren't met, then I mean, at the end of the day, that's just an excuse to not do it anymore and to say,
Yep.
well, I tried that doesn't work for me.
Hmm.
uh,
Yep.
but actually, if you try a meditation and you say, meditation doesn't work for me, well, then maybe you should meditate on why it's not working for you.
Hmm.
And so just don't
Yep.
have, and that's kind of what the whole goalless practice thing is too. I sit down and I meditate, and sometimes my mind is like an angry hive of bees. And sometimes my mind's perfectly fine. It's still, and we can sit there and we can watch the breath all day. But stuff bubbles up because we're not perfect.
Hmm.
And the human mind has a depth to it that you can only truly appreciate it if you do actually meditate, because you are kind of taking a study of yourself. And so people that can't meditate, I would say just try it. Try it for 10 minutes. And at the end, we can do a little guided meditation if you want, just like
Sure.
5 minutes or
Yeah.
something like
Yeah. Yeah.
that. Whatever.
Yeah.
If that were
Yeah.
just to kind of give an example of what a meditation practice should be. Well, and depending on your goals, but then again, why do you have expectations? Don't
Mhm.
bring any of your baggage into meditation. Just let the meditation be, and eventually you will kind of start to see what other people are talking about who do try it. And it, like I said, it's revelatory to be able to say, no, I'm not the contents of my thoughts. And that's not saying that there's not consequences to actions or remembering anything. I have memories that I identify with being in because they are what I would consider to be my memories, and there are consequences
Mhm.
to those actions always. What I'm saying is this experience right now that you and I are having of doing a podcast, in this experience right now, how could I be? How could I be anything other than myself instead of the
Mhm.
contents of, whatever's arising in my mind or in my body at this given time? And maybe that sounds a little bit too juxtaposed. I'm not too sure. But it is the natural, especially if you take the meditation practice in a more spiritual direction, because there's a lot, like mindfulness is a super big buzzword right now.
Mhm.
uh,
Yep.
and there's a lot of secular mindfulness or secular Buddhism, and definitely there are benefits to those practices. And in a lot of cases, there are a lot of secular teachers out there that demystify all of the religious language and dogmas that
Mhm.
we've kind of gotten from more traditional aspects, these practices. And they're the same up to a point. But with a secular practice, if you are looking to improve your life, then that would definitely be beneficial. You definitely don't have to like adopt some kind of religion or anything like that. You don't got to go to a guru or anything. There's plenty of resources out there. I will just say from my own experience though, I have had traction with my personal practice from seeking out qualified instructors that I have not gotten, in the other 5 years of practice. So,
Mm.
take it with a grain of salt, but
Mhm.
there definitely is. And, they can kind of help you navigate those thoughts of, well, I can't meditate, or, I can't blank out my mind. Well, yeah,
Mhm.
of course you can't, because you're a human being,
Mhm.
you're a human being living a human life. Nobody's asking you to blank out your mind or to just exist in some kind of oblivious state.
That's very fair. So what advice would you give someone with PTSD who is interested in exploring meditation as a therapeutic tool? What would you give it if you knew somebody, what advice would you give them?
I would definitely tell them, depending on the severity of their condition, and that's a totally subjective criteria, but if you are experiencing really, really powerful, like say flashbacks, if you can't sleep at night, I would definitely advise somebody to seek qualified help in the form of like a therapist, or maybe hop on some meds or try those as a way to kind of support the practice, because there is a little bit of stability of both mind and body that I think is beneficial for someone to have before they just go ahead and jump off into the deep end of any
Gotcha.
sort of like
Mhm.
religious practices or anything like that, especially if they have expectations of what they're going to encounter in those practices. So definitely, like the way that I did it was I was in therapy and learning how to meditate at the same time.
Mm.
You know, I
Okay.
was in therapy, I was being prescribed medications, and I was learning how to meditate. And I think that helped me a lot, because you can get into very, very deep states of meditation relatively early on in the practice of doing it. And, a lot of people find things that they don't like in there. And some people don't have the foundation to have, like, say, a selfless experience, because if I would have had an experience of, like, say, selflessness when I first got back, I would have
Mm.
felt like I was going to die or something.
Right.
um,
Mhm.
and so, yeah, definitely tread lightly when you're starting out. Start off for like 5 minutes, because nobody, if you kind of look at it from the view of, oh, well, I'm gonna meditate because this tradition says that I'll be enlightened and I won't have any problems anymore, or something like that. Well, that's the wrong attitude to have, and that's kind of almost self-defeatist in the way that saying, well, I just can't meditate anyways is. So
Mhm.
definitely sit down, just make yourself comfortable and focus on your breath, because what we're trying to do in the beginning of developing a practice is we're trying to develop that sort of bandwidth of attention. And whenever you have more stable attention, you're able to meditate longer, because if I have a longer attention span, then I can hold the painful feeling in my legs or in my back a lot longer than, if I, say, just started. So it's definitely a practice that kind of builds on itself. And one of the funny things about it is, if you really get into it, it seems to build on itself in a fairly predictable way. So at first, you're somebody who is meditating and struggling to pay attention to the breath. And after a while, you kind of gain some traction with the practice, and it's something that you want to do instead of something that you're struggling to kind of live up to some kind of ideal. So start small, and definitely, if you encounter anything difficult, seek the help of a qualified medical professional, because it will pay dividends. Absolutely. And the mindfulness practice lattices beautifully with, just traditional psychotherapy. Don't expect too much.
So it's like I'm just looking at my questions and you kind of hit everything. So I have a couple of extra questions that
Ooh.
if you're not prepared, that's okay. Do you have any resources, any books, you can read, like, kind of, as recommend for people, like, starting out? Is there, like,
Yeah.
a website? How did you get, like, what was your initial, like, "Oh, this
So
is beneficial?"
I kind of started a little unconventionally. I was still, having a hard time not drinking, and I was like, Zen Buddhism sounds really cool, and so I got a book on Zen Buddhism. But what I didn't know is that there is a lot of stuff in the Zen literature that you have to have a pretty broad knowledge of what they're talking about already to be able to just kind of assimilate it. Like if I gave
Mhm.
you, or if I gave anybody off the street a book on Zen, like especially something like Zen Mind Beginner's Mind by Suzuki Roshi, then they would be like, okay, great. What do you want me to do with this? So I would say, we kind of live in that social media generation. Get on
Mm.
YouTube, find some
Okay.
good secular teachers,
Mm.
some teachers that have helped me are people like Joseph Goldstein. He is one of the people at the Insight Meditation Center in Massachusetts, I believe. He's a good one.
Okay.
There's also some more traditional teachers that are fairly accessible, like Thich Nhat Hanh. He's a Vietnamese Zen Buddhist, and he actually died not too long ago. But all of his literature and all of his writings are still out there. And if you go to any bookstore, you're going to find something by Thich Nhat Hanh. I guarantee you, if you're looking for it, just because he became so popular, probably 10 or 15 years ago. I can't really put a date on it, but his resources were really, really good and helpful. And, it feels a little bit more credible because he's actually a monastic. He's some 90-year-old dude that's sitting and meditating
Mm.
and, walking the walk, as, you would say. Also, I really like Bhante Gunaratana. He is the head abbot of the Bhavana Society, I believe, in Virginia. He has a book called Mindfulness in Plain English, and he explains mindfulness very, very well. I already alluded to the book by John Kabat-Zinn at the beginning of the podcast. I think that he is fantastic because he's actually a psychotherapist. And so he was the person that developed the MBSR, the mindfulness based stress reduction. And that's already been trialed all over the world and they've had a lot of success. And so definitely check him out. So wherever you go, there you are. I actually just recently listened to that in the audiobook format, and it's actually him reading it. So it's pretty good work. And I like his definition of mindfulness because the practice of mindfulness extends beyond the practice of meditation itself. And if you take it back to, well, where does the authority from all of this come from? Well, it comes from the Buddha. And, whether or not you give that any credence, because I mean, to most people, it's just another religious dude that lived a really long time ago. But he said some pretty insightful things that are really directly helpful to normal everyday people in their lives if you just give it a chance. And that was the big
Mhm.
thing that he always talked about was, don't just take my word for it. Come and see for yourself. Try meditating. I'll teach you how. I'll teach you how to meditate. Tell me what you find. So definitely just like I would say start with the secular teachers, and then if you really want to go deeper, then that's when I would go into the more kind of religious or spiritual writings.
Interesting. That's perfect. So, with that, do you wanna do a little, meditation, how you do it? Do you wanna do
Yeah,
that?
absolutely.
Okay. I
So
don't know how to meditate, so
it's fine. It's fine. So what we're gonna try to do right now
Mhm.
is we're gonna try to sit up in our chair with a straight back. And not
Okay.
like ramrod straight, but there is a sweet spot to
Mhm.
sitting unsupported. And what you
Okay.
want to try to imagine is maybe being lifted up from right here in the back and like by a string by the ceiling and having that kind of pull you up. That way, chest
Okay.
is out, back is straight. And what you'll find is that the vertebra kind of all stack on top of each other and they can just rest there. And you'll be able to feel the breath in your belly really good if you sit like this. And it also keeps you alert because if you slouch or if you lean back in a chair, you're really likely to doze off. Ask me how I know that. But so we're going to sit. And if you don't like to sit cross legged or if for some reason you have like pain or anything like that, just put your legs on the floor. You can put your legs firmly, feet flat on the floor
Okay.
and sitting up in this posture. Posture is very, very important. Yeah, that's pretty much what I do, except, I try to sit, like I said, at least once a day for half an hour. Sometimes I'm really feeling it and I catch myself, sitting for half an hour, 6 or 7 times a day. It
Mm.
just kind of depends on what's happening. And yeah, there's always something new to it. You're never going to have it figured out. It's just a constant unfolding.
So, a couple of things I want to add before we close is that number one, you should write a book. That's number one. I think that you have, and also number two, you have a very great way of explaining this. I think that a lot of people would find this very useful. And if you had your own class or did your own YouTube where you could do this in a setting, I think you would do extremely well. It's something, the whole purpose of what I do is to try and share with people because I see people daily and I just do this all the time. I talk, 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 talk. And I feel like YouTube specifically is a very utilized platform for people searching for answers and searching for ways of doing things like, de stressing, how to fix things, everything, how to eat better. It's just like it's such an incredible platform that, it's simple. Like what you're doing right now, you could do this every day. You could literally make a living. Trust me when I say that, because I see a lot of things on YouTube and I think that you far exceeded what I thought today was going to be in terms of your knowledge base. It's you it was yeah, thank you so much. I learned so much. I'm very relaxed right now.
Yeah,
So this is I appreciate your time. I yeah, I'm super thankful that you shared your time with us today and gave us some insight on meditation and mindfulness. I will share in the show notes below the podcast the books that you referenced, the YouTube people you referenced. I will add that. Anything else you want to share before we land the plane, as they say in closing?
I don't think that I have anything else to add right now. I think that if you give the practice its fair shake,
Mhm.
it will exceed your expectations. So, don't have any expectations. Just if you come to it in the spirit of, I would like to be a better human, then you will find yourself as a better human at some point in the future. I can almost guarantee that. And I just want to also thank you for your time. I love talking about this stuff. I'd go to class every week and I'd learn new stuff just about this because I love it and because it has helped me tremendously kind of overcome some things. And, I'm still working on a lot of stuff and I'm still learning and I don't have it all figured out, but I don't think that's the point. I think it's just getting in there and doing the work and seeing what happens. It's kind of like an experiment. So
It's a journey.
thanks for letting
Yep.
me, yeah, it's a journey.
Mhm.
Thanks for letting
It's a
me
journey.
talk to you.
Mhm.
Thanks for letting me
Yeah,
talk to
yeah.
you.
Yep. Well, thank you again. And if you want to reach out to Colin, I will. I don't want to share your contact information other than if maybe we can do that on the back end. in
Yeah,
terms of
sure.
like if someone yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Perfect. All
no,
right.
for sure.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Colin, for your time. And again, I will share all of his resources below and stay tuned for more episodes. Thank you.